Alright, so Ghostbusters 2016. To start off with, I think my biggest disappointment with the movie, where I know for everyone it's like, why did this take over the original Ghostbusters? Why couldn't it just be a continuation? Aside from that, like as far as what's actually in the movie, my biggest disappointment was definitely the villain. My biggest disappointment is that it wasn't the ghost that took over that guy, because I thought for sure that he's talking in the mirror. They were gonna do so the duality thing where it's like, oh, here's the monster, and then the person is in the mirror, and it's like he's trapped on the inside. Where it's like, excuse me, the way they made it seem at least early on is that he kind of accepted it a little bit, like, oh, I accept being taken over by this demon, and then we create more demons, and then I'll be more powerful because this demon is controlling me. And then it's just like, no, it's actually just this dude by himself. He's just mad. And in one regard, it was cool because they linked it to Abby and Aaron's book, whereas like that's how he was making it, and it showed like they actually knew what they were doing and stuff. And I thought that was a cool element. And I was like, I kind of still wish they did that, but it was still the ghost thing, because it could have been the demon wouldn't know how to make technology that opens up portals, because it makes sense to me at least that they wouldn't have that, because it'd be like, oh, this demon was centuries and centuries ago before people harnessed electricity, stuff like that. And I'm like, that still would have made perfect sense. So outside of what I wish the movie was, as far as what was in the movie, that was my biggest disappointment, was the villain turning out to just be a guy who was mad. And then he turns into the ghost, or the spirit form of himself, I guess, and he takes over Kevin, and he goes through, and then they have him unleash all the ghosts and stuff like that, and that's how we get our little Slimer cameo, and we get Lady Slimer and stuff like that. And it was like, okay, it led to a fine finale. I mean, they had the little action scene, which I thought was pretty cool, and they used the new weapons and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, the villain, that was like my biggest disappointment. It was like, okay, and I've seen some other reviews, and I think it kind of works for the spoiler video, where I kind of incorporate some things that I heard from other reviews. Because as far as the movie goes, it was kind of like, yeah, I'm just in the middle. Like, other reviews didn't change what I thought about the movie, because like, it never changes. If I'm right down the middle, I don't think there's anything anyone can change. There were a couple things that were pointed out that I didn't think about, like the villain. The villain not being a demon, I reckon. I mean, that was literally part of the movie, and I was like, that's disappointing. But the fact that the demon had, or this guy who was turned into like basically a ghost, not really turned into a demon, but the fact that he had like just instantly ultimate control over his powers, like him being able to possess someone, that was simple enough. But when he had like just control over people, like when they did the big dance number, which was really weird, and obviously they had him do the pose and then they cut it and put it at the end credits thing. But him being able to control people like that, I thought was, I didn't think about it when I was watching it, but when I heard that later, I was like, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. It was weird that he'd have so much control. Like, sure, he was studying up on it, but he just turned into a spirit, and then just boom, like crazy control and everything like that. And that didn't really make a ton of sense, and they didn't really do much with it, oddly enough, outside of the dance number. So it was kind of like it's hardly a part of the movie anyway, but technically it was still there because he controlled people. But it was crazy, and like him being able to, well, I guess the shape shifting thing, I guess that was just him in spirit form anyway, and then once again him having like this crazy superpower, like to just transform. It was a little weird, but aside from that, which like I said, I didn't notice when I watched it, the big disappointment was just the fact that he wasn't a demon. It was just some dude who was mad, and he read a book, and so he was able to bring the ghosts out. And I was like, that's a little lackluster to me. Like, it should have totally been an actual demon instead of just some weird dude. And I was like, that kind of sucks. So, I thought that was disappointing. And I mentioned my spoiler-free review early on. They had a really disappointing moment for me, and it was the opening credit scene, because they have this cool opening, and it starts off, which this is why I don't think the movie was horrible. Like, from the very beginning, I was laughing when they did that freaking thing where the guy was giving the tour of the house, and he was saying like some really weird stuff, like this. I can't remember any of the lines, but it was like stuff that a tour guide shouldn't be saying, and it was weird stuff like, this is where the servants were, or something like that. And it would just be like, really, it was silly stuff. And then it got serious, and it got dark, and it was like, oh, okay, And I like the way they did the opening shot because it's like, oh, the little blue thing is like an electricity thing, and I thought it was like a magnet, like he hit a button and it pushed the thing off, and it was like, magnets or whatever. And then it's like, oh, he picks it up and he hits the button, and the little lever comes on. It's like, oh, the little blue thing had nothing to do with it, and I thought that was a cool way to do it because that's what I thought it was. It was like, oh, the little blue light thing is what helps him do the little trick. I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. And then it's like, oh, that had nothing to do with what he was doing. And I was like, that's a cool opening. And then he, freaks out and he runs in the basement and he's like, oh crap, like I'm such an idiot. And then the ooze starts coming up and he freaks out. I thought he was going to die, by the way. I thought for sure he was going to die. And then we saw him later. I was like, oh, he lived. I was so surprised by that. But they have the opening shot and he's freaking out. And then it goes, the theme swells up and stuff. And it's just like Ghostbusters. And then it's just stuff. I was like, that was super lackluster because it wouldn't be much, but I thought it would at least be like a black screen, and it's just the black screen. It's like, boom, Ghostbusters, and you see it. It was like, nope, Ghostbusters, and then it's just panning over the city. I was like, that's kind of lame, honestly. And then the music, and it trailed off in like 2 seconds, and it's like, as soon as they say Ghostbusters, it's like, Ghostbusters, and it's like, when it's something strange, and then it's gone. I was like, well, that sucked. That kind of sucked a little bit, to be totally honest. So that disappointed me too. Just the opening credits thing, which never matters to me. But it was like, man, especially I guess because it's Ghostbusters. When you have such an iconic theme, you think you would have a cool opening shot or something like that. Like if I remember right, the original Ghostbusters had like a montage. It was just a montage of New York and just people doing random stuff, and it wasn't even the characters, but I thought they kind of needed that for this opening. Like, have a little montage or have something. And it's like, Ghostbusters have maybe like a cool opening shot where it's just the credits, but it's like visual credits. So they're like wiping away like ghost spirits and stuff, and then other names come in. And little stuff like that I thought worked because it's Ghostbusters. You have a great theme. People are actually interested to hear the theme because it's a good freaking theme song. As long as you don't have to hear it 100 million times, over and over. But it was just like, oh, Ghostbusters came up, and then it went away, and then the song went away. When it was like, when it got right into the lyrics, it fades out, and it's like, that's a little lame. I'm gonna say, like, that was a pretty sad opening. It was like a great opening scene, and then just sad opening credits, and I was just like, man, that kind of sucks. I was looking forward to like a cool opening thing, and that's just, it stood out so much to me. I was just like, oh, they just put Ghostbusters in the middle, and it pans over the city. And that was it. And it went away. And that was it. And I was like, oh, that's disappointing. And then it goes more into like the verse, kind of the big joke between the Ghostbusters with the queefing thing. Did not make me laugh at all. I was like, huh, that was a little weird. Wasn't expecting that for Ghostbusters. But like I said in my spoiler-free review, I laughed a lot in this. I was surprised by how much I laughed. In this, I think I laughed more in this than I did in the original, just because it was more modern comedy, and that was something I think was a very clear-cut thing. It was like, this is clearly, like the opening scene with the tour guide. Like, I know this guy isn't going to be in the whole movie. So I knew it was like, oh, this is just, here's this one person who's funny because it's this specific shot. And that's kind of what it was like. Even though we had the Ghostbusters themselves, like, we had these four women making a lot of the jokes, it was still a lot based on the very specific scene they were in. And not really much about them. Really, if you really think about it, most of the jokes we're in this moment, this is what's funny. And some of those jokes were still funny. I think the one that really stuck as far as characters was, I can't remember who is Abby and who is Aaron, but Melissa McCarthy's character with the food, where it's like, I just want like a legitimate ratio of the freaking food. And I think that was the one thing that was just like her character thing. And then kind of what they did with Patty, but I didn't like that personally because it was like they seemed to just be attacking the black lady, where it's like, oh, you perfect, Patty, this is your fault, you did something wrong. Like when they were at the office, and I know it was meant to be funny. It was like, oh, bring attention and stuff. It's like, oh, well, Patty does wear big earrings. I was like, that, I don't know. It just, I don't know, because they did it. I mentioned that in the spoiler-free review, but they just did it multiple times. Like when they're catching the dragon ghost thing, and it was like, all right, you're doing right. Patty, try a little harder. And it was like, I could see if she was effing up, but it was like they're literally doing the exact same thing, and it just seemed like they were picking on the black lady. Like, no joke, when they did that, it just seemed like they were picking on the black lady, and I was like, that kind of bugs me a little because it happened several times. But other than that, it was just like, Melissa McCarthy's character with the wonton soup. there were no like character things, and Holtzman as a character was funny, and I loved her character. I know some people didn't like it; they thought it was over the top. I personally loved her character. I think like a lot of people did. She was my favorite. Her and Patty, I think, were my favorite too. But Holtzman was definitely my favorite just because she was silly and she'd say stuff, like when they were at the office and they were talking about them breaking laws, and the guy was like, "How many? Do you know how many laws you broke?" And she was like, "One." I was like, "No." Is it two? No. And then she went back to one. I was like, "That's really funny to me." I thought that was a funny joke, and just her character in general, I thought was really silly. And like when she's having them try out the new weapons, it's like pick anything you want, and then she screams like she just got shot. Like not that one, like that's already, but anything else, you just go ahead. And I thought that was really funny because she could have taken that off the table, but they made it where she's just the silly character, and I liked her character. I thought she was like I said, she was personally my favorite. Patty was number two. Kevin was probably number three. Kevin was just funny in general because he was so dumb, and he was the character funny thing, kind of like Holtzman was, but he was just so dumb, but it made me laugh. Like I couldn't help it. Like it just made me like him with the phone thing, and he was trying to reach it, and when it was inside the aquarium, and then when they were like answer the phone, and he was like, "Oh, I can't. It's over there in the aquarium." That made me laugh. Like a lot of the things they did with him made me laugh, and like the ending when he's like, I went to look for you guys, and so I went over to that sandwich shop and I made a sandwich, and they're like, we're in like, a wormhole and stuff, and you went and made a sandwich. He's like, yeah, but we all did it, like, us, the Ghostbusters, and he kept trying to include himself. He's like, no, we did it, but you went and made a sandwich. He's like, no, but we all did it though, the Ghostbusters. So I like that too. Like just stuff they did with him was really funny. Um, the glasses thing I thought was funny. I didn't even notice that when he did it. I thought he literally went under his glasses. And then she's like, can I ask you why no glasses? And he's like, oh, they just got dirty, so I took them out. And I was like, that's just really silly. Like, he just didn't need glasses. Or maybe he did. Who knows? Like, he's that dumb. It's hard to tell. Maybe he actually needed them. Um, but I like that. I thought that was really funny. The coffee thing I thought was pretty funny. I thought that was fine, at least. And he was like, all right, it was cool. I'm cool with the characters, and I was fine with it. But I definitely noticed going through it was really scene moments that were funny, and not really a lot of the character stuff that was super funny, or them bouncing off of each other that was funny. It was either they're making jokes about each other, mostly about Patty, or it was just something funny about the very specific situation that they were in. And I think that's a part of the reason why it doesn't really match up with the old stuff, where that was more about them as the characters bouncing off each other, especially Dan Aykroyd and Bill Murray, because they were literally comedians, SNL, so they had it like, just riff off each other. And we do still have that, but I feel like they didn't utilize it as much, maybe, between Melissa McCarthy and, I can't think of her name, unfortunately. All I can think of is Melissa McCarthy. And actually, Leslie Jones. So three of the four women are actually all from SNL, and I feel like, yeah, they've all been in SNL, but three of them are actually actresses from SNL, because Leslie Jones is Stoltzman. I wish I could. All I can think of is Leslie Jones and Melissa McCarthy as actual names, and Chris Hemsworth, and that's seriously it. But three of the actresses are actually like recurring people from SNL, and then Melissa McCarthy has been on SNL a ton of different times. So, they have it too, but I feel like they didn't let them utilize it as much. And maybe if they did, it once again just modern comedy. It felt more about the situation than the actual characters with each other. And they had that a little bit, and it mostly came from Patty a little bit, where she talked about like, oh, you guys are doing this and it's silly, or um, when Melissa McCarthy's character was taken over by the ghost, and she's like, see, you gotta eat those sandwiches, and high blood pressure and stuff. Little stuff like that, I felt like was reminiscent of the old Ghostbusters, where it'd be little lines between each other. But it was so rare to me, and then Holtzman was just really silly. So that was just, you knew that was going to be her. But for everyone else, it felt like it was just written as comedy, and it wasn't really, not that I felt they had bad chemistry. It was just like very situational comedy and not character comedy that continued on throughout the movie. It was like, here's a funny thing about a character, or that a character does, but it's not really like their characters. I feel like I'm saying it in a really horrible way to explain it, but that's just how I felt. That's the best way I could think to explain it. It was just very scene-based comedy and not character-based comedy outside of, Stoltzman, who was just the crazy character, and then Kevin, who was just the super dumb character, and then they kind of did it like a tiny bit with Patty. But like I said in my spoiler-free review, I still laughed a lot. I laughed. I had quite a few laughs early on. Like I said, with the tour guide, he made me laugh. I wish I could remember any of the lines he said, but I just remember I laughed in that opening, and I was laughing a little bit extra because I was like, I thought this was going to be really serious, but then it got serious, and they had some of those dark moments, which the original Ghostbusters had as well, and excuse me, and I like that, like the mannequin thing. Mannequins are freaking creepy, and they had a funny line right before it because it's like, oh, that's a room of nightmares, and Patty just keeps going. I thought that was a hilarious line, but then the mannequin is actually chasing her, and then it turns into a dragon, which was a little weird, but dragons can ghosts in general can take over things and do whatever the terms they were saying were. It was something transference, whatever. But they didn't really have like the horror stuff, and they hardly had that in the original either. But it seemed like it was something they were kind of constantly hinting at, and I kind of wish they kept doing it. Like the guy who was electrocuted in the subway ghost. It was creepy, but I felt the other stuff was creepy. Like the mannequins are just creepy in general. It's, faceless bodies, so kind of just instantaneously creepy. But I felt like they were hinting at that at 2 points. Like the very opening scene where the guy I thought was about to get killed, and the mannequin scene, they really kind of leaped towards like the really creepy stuff, but then it instantly went away, and I was like, I kind of wish they went a little bit further with the creepiness, because it is ghosts, and they do get creepy, especially old Ghostbusters, especially because it was like the demon dogs. Pretty much, it got even creepier because it was like actual like stuff there, and it was prosthetics and things like that, so it made it even creepier compared to a lot of the CG stuff, which I know a lot of people had issues with the CG. I was fine with the CG. I know they used like actual people, but they added CG to them, and they had like bioluminescent outfits on and stuff, and that's why they were all glowing blue and stuff like that, except for the ghosts that were, for whatever reason, glowing green at the end of the movie that were like flying around the hotel. Everything else is blue, and of course Slimer, he has to be green. But yeah, it was like, oh, whatever. I didn't really care that much about it. I thought it was fine. There are only really like two ghosts anyway, or three ghosts until they get to the end anyway, and they only capture one. And that was another thing I thought was cool. I thought their version of the ghost trap, I thought that was actually pretty cool. That it was like on them, and she was able to like kick it out and stuff, and then she like steps on the thing and all that stuff. I was like, I like that. I thought that was just a cool new way to do it, because they could have. They have the firehouses and all the cameos, so they could have just had like, oh, it's just the whole thing. But they didn't do that, and I was like, oh, that's actually a cool way to do it. And I just like the way I thought it looked cool. I was like, oh, that's a cool little design. She's able to kick it, and it kind of fit oddly enough because they were at like the rock concert, so it was like she had like a whammy pedal almost. But I just thought it looked cool. I was like, oh, that's pretty sweet. And then, unfortunately, that doesn't matter because they don't have a containment unit until like that little mid-credit scene. And that leads to one of the crazier things about the movie, which is Bill Murray's cameo where he dies from the ghost, and it's kind of like nothing happened, like it doesn't matter. And I guess in a sense, it kind of works. At least it seemed like it did. I don't know. I guess it kind of worked a little bit because technically those two guys were from the FBI, even though there was no reason for them to be from the FBI. But I guess that's the only way that scene could have at least made some sense, because if it was like, oh, it's just the mayor's people, it'd be like, oh, so the mayor's taking them away from the scene where the guy got thrown out a window by the ghosts that no one wants to believe exist right now, which is another weird thing that they did like in the end of the movie, where it's like, maybe it happened, we don't know. It was like a giant portal in this. It's New York. It's like a quadrillion people in that place, and they were in Times Square. Everybody was running. Times Square basically has cameras 24/7. Like, they're just cameras sitting out. There would have been footage. There is no, did we see what we saw? Like, I'm pretty sure you did. There was a building that blew up and then it reformed, which was pretty cool. And a giant marshmallow-looking guy who was the Ghostbusters symbol and stuff. It's like, people saw that. In fact, if you lived in New Jersey, or anywhere, you could be like off the island. It doesn't really matter. there's a giant building and there's swirling green stuff coming out of it, I think you'd be able to see that. I think that would stick out. Maybe not. I guess all the power was on, so maybe people just thought it was a concert. Who knows? It was a little weird, and it was like, oh, I guess a lot of people know it happened, but on the news, there's literally zero footage that it ever happened. So that was weird. Bill Murray dying, and then kind of nothing about that being arrest worthy, because they should have been in handcuffs. Like that next scene there should have been zero explanation as to, so this is what happened or that's what happened. It should have been like, oh, a ghost, you're under arrest. Like that's how it should have been. At least at that point in the movie, it should have been that, because I think that was before they even met the mayor. So it was just like yeah, they should have been like arrested almost instantaneously, because no one believes them about the ghost stuff. And I don't. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. It was a weird little scene, and I guess because the mayor's people, well, the FBI or whatever came in, they technically do have more jurisdiction, so it makes a little bit more sense. Although they did come in, and it was like, when they first came in, it's like, oh, the mayor wants to see you. It's like, oh, so they took him away. I thought they were going to be the FBI, and then they took him to the mayor, and it's like, oh, no, these are the FBI. But they kind of just do what the mayor tells them. Like, they should come in and tell the mayor what to do if they're coming in for, a supernatural level event and all this stuff. But it's just two dudes, and they seem to be more like the mayor's bodyguards than secret agents. If you, like, when you go through the movie, they don't do anything. They keep saying let them do stuff, and then they don't, because they don't get the chance to. But they also seem to listen to the mayor when they're like the CIA or whatever, and that's like, blanket, we got more power in our pinkies than you have over this whole city, sort of deal. So it was a little weird how they used them, or didn't use them, I guess. But I don't know. It was a movie. My thing's gonna cut off. I'm basically at the end again, but it was a movie. Like, honestly, I didn't hate the movie. I laughed quite a bit. I laughed a lot more than I thought I would. I didn't think it would be nearly as funny, but I think that's also one of, it's not even a drawback. It's a drawback for people that are comparing it so much to the first film, which it kind of does to itself with all the cameos and dialogue as well at certain points. There's also an after credit scene where they reference Zool, so that, I guess, is their thing for Ghostbusters 2, whenever that's supposed to come out. I don't even know if this movie made a lot of money or not. I'm assuming it did because of all the controversy. I would assume there have to be at least 5,000 people that saw this solely based on the controversy, and that's really tiny. The whole freaking planet. At least 5,000 is being insanely generous, because I swear there have to be so many people that saw it solely based on the controversy, just to see, is this movie really going to be that bad just because people are hating on it so much. So I don't really know how much money it made. I don't know if it broke records or anything. I didn't really care when it came out. Like I said, I was not losing my mind to see it. My girlfriend had no interest in seeing it, and normally that's our thing. If we both want to see a movie, we see it like day of and stuff like that. So she didn't want to see it. I was like, I just want to see it to compare it, and so whatever. But to compare it, it's a funny movie. I laughed quite a bit. I think there was some stuff wrong with it. Disappointed about the monster thing. The ending sequence was fine, where they're fighting all the ghosts and stuff, and